Hearing that the boy was an international student from the U.S., the bullies immediately approached, assuming he was wealthy and demanding money. However, he firmly refused.
Wow.
Unable to accept being rejected, the leader of the group devised a plan to extort him. Little did he know, his fate was already sealed. His sister, also a student at the school, decided to step in and take action to protect her brother. The boy simply smiled, revealing that he had quietly gathered information on all the bullies at school and was now preparing a plan of retaliation. The man wearing the baseball cap was the captain of the football team, a person willing to do anything to get high marks in math. However, to get the necessary equipment, he had only one option: to seek the help of the engineer's son, who was standing on the other side and held the answers to the challenging test. 2 weeks later, Warren gave the top student, A.E., a rare set of collectible cards, the very ones he had longed for, in exchange for the test answers. Later, Warren secretly passed the answers to a muscular boy, asking him to take care of the bully. But one person wasn't enough. Warren decided to stage an injury in order to sneak into the school's infirmary, where he quietly stole a few special pills used to help athletes pass physical fitness tests. When people gathered, they coordinated an attack on the bully and his gang. Standing in the middle of the chaos was Warren Blake, the son of a Mafia boss. This somewhat explained his way of handling problems, deeply influenced by the underworld. His family was far from ordinary. They had fled here to escape the pursuit of criminal gangs. Fred Blake, Warren's father, was once a notorious crime boss. Along with his wife Maggie, their children Belle and Warren, and their dog, Malavita, they constantly moved and changed identities to evade those hunting them. Their sworn enemy, Don Lukes, had tried to kill Fred years ago when they were rival Mafia bosses. But Fred struck first. He turned Lukes over to the police, sending his enemy to prison. From that moment on, Luke's men relentlessly hunted them down for revenge. He placed a $2 million bounty on the Blake family's heads, making them the target of countless assassins and forcing them into a life on the run. In Italy, Rocco, a notorious Mafia hitman known for his cold demeanor, ruthlessly slaughtered a family of 4, mistakenly believing they were the Blakes. To prove his kill, he cut off the father's finger and sent it to Don Lukes, who was still serving his sentence in prison. However, after verifying the kill, Lukes discovered that Rocco had murdered the wrong people. Without hesitation, he ordered the hitman to continue hunting the Blake family, this time with no room for mistakes. Meanwhile, the Blakes were preparing to leave the U.S. for Normandy, France, under the protection of the FBI Eyewitness Protection Program. In the stillness of the night, they arrived at their new home, hastily restoring power and lighting a fire to keep warm. Fred appeared busy exploring every corner of the house, but in reality, he was hiding a secret a friend he had taken from the trunk of his car and quietly buried in the backyard. The next morning, the family was ready to start a new chapter. Maggie decided to take a walk around the small town, hoping to find something interesting to explore. However, when she stopped by a cafe, the waitress unintentionally confirmed Maggie's worst fear: the town was dreadfully dull. To make matters worse, the only attraction was 20 kilometers away, a massive PR machine. Afterward, Maggie stopped by a convenience store to pick up some groceries. While browsing the aisles, she accidentally overheard a conversation between the cashier and a few customers. They casually mocked Americans, assuming Maggie wouldn't understand since the conversation was in French. Anger flared within her. Without hesitation, she grabbed a few bottles of liquor and a can of gasoline from the shelves, tossed them into the storage room, and set them ablaze, dropping a match onto the pile. Then, she calmly paid for her groceries and walked out, just as a massive explosion erupted behind her. A little later, while having lunch at a fast food restaurant, Maggie once again became the center of attention, this time, not because of an impulsive act, but because she took a sip of soda that was way too strong, leaving those around her stunned. Not long after, Belle decided to visit a church and took the opportunity to strike up a conversation with the priest, hoping to make a new friend. Meanwhile, Warren arrived at his new school, where he quickly ran into trouble with a group of bullies. However, with his sharp wit and defiant attitude, he quickly handled them. After school, while heading home, Belle unexpectedly caught the attention of 4 young men. They invited her to join them. At first, she refused, but after getting lost in town, she decided to accept their offer for a ride. However, instead of taking Belle home, the group drove her to a lake where they often hung out. When Belle asked to be taken home, the leader of the group told her to relax. However, his actions made her uneasy as he strangely loosened the straps of her dress and spoke in a suggestive tone. Determined not to let them get away with it, Belle went back to the car, grabbed a tennis racket, and struck the leader hard. She then demanded that the rest of them learn to respect women. After that, she drove his car home. At the same time, Fred stepped outside to relax, although he knew he shouldn't be doing so. However, he quickly realized that FBI agents were watching him from a close distance. Deciding not to take any chances, he went back inside and started observing the shed through the transparent glass. After clearing away some old items, Fred discovered a typewriter and realized it was still in good working condition. He suddenly thought that maybe it was time to write his memoir, to record the story of how he took over the family business that his grandfather had built over decades. While taking a break, Fred ran into his neighbor in the backyard. When the neighbor asked him what he did for a living, Fred quickly came up with a new story and claimed to be a writer. That evening, while the whole family was gathered around the dinner table, FBI agent Robert Stansfield, who was in charge of their case, paid them a visit. After listening to Fred's story about being a writer, Stansfield skillfully shifted the topic and asked about a recently missing salesman. Fred shook his head, insisting he knew nothing about the case. In reality, Fred had killed the salesman because he had sold him spoiled seafood. Stansfield warned Fred not to cause any trouble, and before leaving, he reminded him that FBI agents were monitoring him from the house across the street, where Chico and MIMO were standing watch. That night, Fred and his wife went to bed. In his dream, he suddenly recalled a barbecue he had hosted many years ago, an event during which Luke's decided to launch his attack. The next day, while Fred was engrossed in his writing, Maggie suddenly asked him what he was doing. As she realized it was a memoir, she couldn't help but be curious and wanted to know more. She was horrified to realize that this action could cause serious trouble. She immediately picked up the plate of food prepared for Chico and Mimo, then hurriedly left to deliver it to them, at the same time asking Fred to check the tap water, because it had turned brown. At the same time, Belle got caught up in a fight in the bathroom with a girl who had stolen her pencil case in the cafeteria. Belle accidentally noticed a very handsome guy whom Warren identified as HRIA college student and math teacher. He was the dream guy for every girl in school, so if Belle wanted to pursue him, she would have to compete with many others. Although math-obsessed guys could be a bit annoying, Belle had a plan. After class, she took the initiative to approach HRI and asked him to tutor her in math, and he agreed. When he got home, Fred was frustrated because the plumber arrived more than 40 minutes late and tried to replace unnecessary pipes in the house. Fred was so angry that he couldn't control himself. He called his wife, demanding that she pay 50% upfront and reschedule the appointment. In the end, in a fit of rage, he hit the plumber with a tool he found in the basement, then dumped his body into the plumber's own truck. Fred then drove to the hospital, where doctors were completely baffled by the fractures on the man's body. They suspected it could be the result of a fall, but they couldn't explain why there were 12 fractures. At the same time, Rocco found the family of the seafood store owner and killed them, as they couldn't provide any information about Fred. Fred continued writing his memoir, sharing memories of the time he took care of his old neighbors in Brooklyn. That evening, Maggie scolded him for his actions toward the plumber, and Fred retorted by bringing up the explosion at the convenience store that she caused for revenge. As the weekend approached, the family decided to host a barbecue and invited all the neighbors, although not everyone was thrilled about the idea. However, Stansfield insisted that this would be a good way for the family to integrate into the community. Maggie asked Belle about the guy she had invited and reminded her to be careful. Belle reassured her mother that she wouldn't rush things and would choose the right time and place to be with her true love. Later, Warren brought a few bottles of soda and asked his mother to ditch the French food and switch to American dishes, since that's what the neighbors would be expecting. And just as he had said, he was right. The neighbors came and were delighted to enjoy their unique dishes.
Maggie?
Even Chico and Mimo were allowed to leave their posts and join in the fun. However, the only one missing was Fred, whom Belle found in the shed out back, engrossed in writing about his life. Looking at the words, he felt as though he was facing himself in a mirror, reflecting for hours on his past mistakes, especially the regret of not being a better father, leaving his children to face difficult situations. However, Belle disagreed with Fred, insisting that he was the best father in the world. Her words gave Fred a sense of reassurance. When he finally joined the party, the neighbors began trying to show him how to start a fire, but Fred felt he didn't need their help. Fred was filled with anger again, and in his mind, he imagined countless ways to take revenge on those around him for their rudeness. However, luckily, Stansfield interrupted his thoughts as he arrived. The two of them had a private conversation, and Stansfield informed Fred that everyone at the White House was concerned about the book he was writing, as it could cause serious trouble for many people. Fred reassured Stansfield that the book was simply for himself and that he had no intention of publishing it. He also shared with Stansfield that his testimony about Liazy was actually a brilliant marketing strategy that the FBI had never thought of. As more and more former members of Fred's old Mafia gang came asking for protection to live safer lives, Bell felt disappointed because Horny hadn't shown up after the party ended. The next morning, Fred went to meet with the mayor to complain about the brown water, but the mayor had no solution to offer. Fred angrily imagined hitting him for his incompetence, but in the end, he left the office without causing any trouble. Fred then went to the water company to verify that the water source in the reservoir was indeed contaminated. A worker revealed an important clue to Fred. Out of more than 50 fertilizer plants in the area, only one plant was involved in the issue. Fred immediately visited that plant, and when the owner displayed rudeness and incompetence, Fred didn't hesitate to tie him up and drag him along the road until the man was forced to yield and confess. The owner explained that in order to get clean water, the turbine needed to be turned off, as it was the cause of the pump's malfunction. With this important information in hand, Fred let the man and his bicycle go in the middle of the road, warning that if he didn't cooperate, there would be serious consequences. When Fred returned home, he found Stansfield reading his manuscript. Stansfield seemed to like it, but didn't hesitate to criticize Fred for writing it from the start without thinking things through. Meanwhile, Maggie continued visiting the church, where the priest assured her that everything she shared with him would remain confidential. He tried to convince Maggie to confess everything, but what she revealed left the priest so worried that he remained puzzled for the entire week. Eventually, he decided to forbid her from entering the church, asserting that her family was the embodiment of evil and did not deserve to step into this sacred place, not even for the love of God. At school, Warren suddenly realized he had forgotten to write the article for the newspaper as promised and only had 5 minutes left to submit it. He hurriedly quoted a saying he had heard as a child.
"It's good enough for you, it's good enough for me."
The newspaper was widely distributed, read on planes, or even used to wrap things, and that was how its message spread. At the same time, in Luke's cell, the old man immediately recognized the connection and ordered his men to go to Normandy to find Fred once and for all. After school, Bell visited Hari at his house, and as they locked the door, they leaned against each other in silence. That evening, Fred received a call from a neighbor inviting him to a barbecue and a monthly community movie screening event. After watching a film, they would discuss it, and next time, they planned to show an American classic. They hoped Fred could lead the discussion, drawing on his experience as a writer. Fred agreed, but immediately, Stansfield appeared and warned him that it was a bad idea. The FBI was monitoring all his calls, so he needed to be extremely cautious. Fred disagreed with Stansfield's warning, believing that the movie screening event was a great opportunity to show a harmonious relationship with the community. He convinced Stansfield to join him the following day. At the same time, Warren's violent behavior and criminal activities were discovered by the school board, causing great concern among students, teachers, and adults. This forced Warren to rush home, grab some money, and forge documents to escape to Paris, where he planned to start over with his business career, just like his father had done when he was young. Before leaving, he said goodbye to his sister, who was upset over her brief romance with Hari, someone he knew would only be a fleeting memory. After graduating, Warren began his journey to Paris. To mislead the FBI, Fred placed a doll in a chair, making them believe it was him, and then quietly left the house. Before meeting Stansfield, he had planted a bomb in the brown water turbine. Both of them attended the movie event, and when they arrived, they discovered that the film being shown was Goodfellas. Stansfield thought that choosing this film was a mistake, but Fred explained that leaving before the movie started would only draw more attention. After the movie ended, Fred was asked to share with the audience that Goodfellas had portrayed life in New York very accurately. Unable to hold back any longer, Fred began sharing his experiences as a mafia boss, making the audience believe that these stories were mere fiction, part of his role. However, Stansfield disagreed, believing that Fred had lost control. He immediately called Chico and MIMO, instructing them to gather the family and implement Plan B. Meanwhile, Warren was waiting for the train at the Paris station, while Bell stood on the roof, calling Ree and threatening to commit suicide if he didn't come back to pick her up. At the same time, the siblings discovered a group of Mafia hitmen entering the town, forcing them to return home to warn their parents, especially since Warren tried to call them but received no response, as Maggie was unable to answer in time. The group of hitmen attacked the police station, killing everyone and using their records to trace Fred's address. They also killed firefighters and sabotaged the tires of a truck carrying Christmas trees. Maggie, along with Chico and Mimo, decided to search for the children, as they had gone missing. Just then, a massive explosion shook the town, It was the bomb that Fred had detonated to create an alibi for himself during the movie screening event. Stansfield immediately drove Fred home, warning him not to go outside if he encountered the police. Maggie was also about to return home, but as soon as she stepped outside, she noticed a group of unfamiliar men in black clothes approaching. In a panic, she quickly went back inside with Chico and Mimo. She tried calling home, but her husband didn't answer. The assassins broke into the house and detonated explosives, killing all the neighbors who were standing outside watching. Fred was lucky to hear the Malavita dog barking as a warning, allowing him to quickly hide in the garden and escape unharmed. Maggie tried to chase after him, but as Chico and Mimo approached the door, an assassin appeared and shot them, threatening to exploit Maggie's weakness before finishing her off. Immediately, Fred charged at the assassin, attacking him and choking him from behind, determined not to let him escape. While Maggie searched for a knife and used it to finish off the attacker, the other assassins continued to rummage through the debris of the house, arguing whether they should kill the dog. Just then, Warren and Bell appeared, stealing some weapons from the assassin's car trunk. A fierce gunfight broke out, and Warren and Bell managed to take down most of the attackers, leaving only Rocco. After being shot, Warren fell unconscious. Bell hurriedly dropped him to the ground and fled, hoping that Rocco would run out of ammo before he could catch up. However, the old man proved unexpectedly resilient, continuing to chase Bell until Stansfield suddenly appeared, running him over with his car. Although the assassin may have been killed, Fred's family's identity was exposed, forcing them to move to a new town and start over with new lives and identities. However, Fred still felt a certain joy, as he was finally able to share his story with others, even though everyone around him still saw it as just a fictional tale.